Okay, so, and Graham, if you want, you can join me up here since, as was discussed earlier, this is primarily Graham's brainchild. We've been working with UARC because one of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten on the website is that we haven't necessarily given prescriptive guidance about how to evaluate a website. So as you guys are thinking about this, as you're thinking about your websites and this whole idea of access and point of entry that Nate was talking about, we want to give you a tool which would help you go through your websites for accessibility. Whether this is something that you use or a student uses, it's kind of up to you. And I guess I kind of want to let Graham talk about it a little bit more, about how it's structured and things like that.
Okay, so there's a lot of things that go into trying to figure out how to make a protocol that can be used across campus at a wide variety of levels. So what we tried to do here, and you'll see there's listed out tiers, and kind of won't go through it in much detail, but I'll show a little bit. The intent is people who are like administrative assistants who have no background in the web can do something and do it completely. People who are web developers can go through a lot more and do it completely, and no one will be overwhelmed, because that's part of the problem is if you give someone who doesn't know this stuff everything, they don't know where to start. So what we've done is we've got tier 1 is pretty simple stuff to check. Things you could pass off to someone who doesn't really know what they're doing, and they could fill that out completely. And that can then be reported up because it's a single tier. Each tier here is only a single page. There's no more than 10 things in any tier. The second tier is a little bit more complicated. The third tier is the first part where we get screen readers. So it's called the screen reader tier because there's a lot of screen reader stuff in it. And in this document, it explains kind of how to use screen readers and how to check each of these. And I can kind of, when I jump down to anything here, it's not going to try and zoom in or anything, but it basically tells you what the protocol is. It's not going to be a perfect evaluation. It's not going to get you everything. It's not the same as contracting me to do a full evaluation, but it's going to get you a decent part of the way there. And as you go, it gets a little harder and a little harder, a little more complex in terms of the knowledge you need to have. By the end, it's actually the code tier where you have to understand HTML code to really evaluate this. But the key is when it's reported out by tier. So if someone only evaluates the first 2 tiers, that can be reported up. That's data that can be used, and it can then be collected at the university level where you're not combining across tiers where it would be very confusing. So it's intended to really take that into account and make it simpler for whoever's evaluating to do things and to kind of parcel it out as you go. And again, each of the tiers is fairly small, and this is intended to be done at a site basis. It also includes a little bit of guidance on sampling, not a huge amount. It's really up to you to determine how you want to do that, but this can then be collected at that upper level. And again, each of these, it's specifically said in here, each tier you do in full. You don't do part of the tests in a tier because then data doesn't really make any sense. So in the end, Phil and Nate will have data saying there's this many sites that report problems with this particular thing. That can then determine how they're going to structure providing assistance to the university, how resources can be allocated in your units, and whatever else might need to be done.
Yeah, including training. So if we have... Sorry. Yeah, including training. So if we have a lot of people are asking questions about Tier 3, we know that we need to develop more training materials and probably more documentation on our website. The goal with this is to kind of give us a launching point to house extra resources underneath it to kind of help you, and we'll start populating that based on the questions that we get, whether that's through the one-year reviews or just anecdotally, or just sending us an email.
The other thing I should mention is Tier 1 has a lot of the things that came up in the OCR letter. So these are things we know are highly critical. But to give one example of the difference between kind of levels here, Tier 1 has looking at color contrast just visually. Just look at it, does it look like it's bad color contrast? It's not asking someone to use the color contrast analyzer tool. That's down in, I want to say that's Tier 4, I think. Yeah, Tier 4 is use the tool for this. Even though it's the same thing and it seems redundant, again, the goal is if someone can only test Tier 1, you're still getting some information. You're not saying, well, we're not expecting this person to figure out how to use this tool, so we'll get no information about color contrast. So there's things like that that are redundant, and like the screen reader tier has a bunch of things that you might have looked at, tried to figure out without a screen reader at a simple level, and then you're really checking it when you get to that later tier.
Yeah, and this is as Graham said, it's not like fully encompassing of every single test that you would do for WCAG, but it's pretty
Really
inclusive
comprehensive.
of a lot of different tests that an accessibility person would run. So, we want to get this to you guys to help.
Yeah. And one other thing is that right now it does not have anything from Accessibility Oz, or whatever it's called, what's
Ozart.
Yeah. That is intended to be in a later version of this. The current feeling is that that's not really ready to use. So we want this to be ready to go and can be used right now and not have anything in here that doesn't really make sense or that is incomplete. So there will be later versions. This is always going to be a work in progress is my feeling on it, that provide feedback, please. If there's something that's unclear, let me know, or let Phil know and he can let me know. But when Ozart gets to the point where it is ready to do that, that'll be integrated in here to streamline that process as well.
Yeah, I think that covers pretty much everything. I feel like there's one other thing I wanted to say.
Questions?
Yeah,
While you're thinking.
let's just do that. Does anyone have the questions about this process? Oh, I remember the other thing I wanted to say. We've kind of been, we've tested this a little bit with some of the students on our team. I don't remember if you had the chance to take a look at this, JoJo, but a couple of different students on our team use this, and we're reaching out to a few more people that we're really looking for feedback for on this document. If you are interested in providing feedback on this doc, let me know, and we'll set up a time to kind of get your feedback. We're hoping to put it out sometime on the website. Sometime maybe next week or the week after. But again, this is going to be kind of a live thing that we want to, invest resource in over time.
Is this mainly a tool for MAUs, or is it mainly a tool to report out to you guys, or both?
Both. So it's for. Oh, actually, how do you define MAUs? The question was, is this mainly a tool for MAUs or to report back to us?
Well, I'm thinking, like, is it mainly internal, like for our, our purposes, or is it designed to be a reporting tool?
It's meant to accomplish both. What I would say to your question of whether it's mainly internal is, again, it kind of depends on how your MAU structures things. Some MAUs have like a whole committee of people that do accessibility liaising, and some only have one or two people. But if you have a community of folks that are interested in the subject, we definitely would encourage you to point them to this, and to ask them to let you know if there is a tier where they kind of like maybe can't progress to.
It was definitely designed with both of those things in mind.
What about for MAUs, like the libraries that might use this to evaluate vendor resources? Is this still meant to be an internal document, or could this be shared with vendors?
I would say that it was mainly designed to be an internal document, but we're going to be putting it on our website, so it's going to be out there. If I were you, I would still recommend putting it into a report format. Yeah, but this can help you do those types of projects if you ever need to do an evaluation on a product that you're thinking about buying.
Yeah, the document itself will be public. I would never give this to a vendor and ask them to fill it out, because this is really intended to be at a different level. Yeah, no, I understand. It could, in theory, be shared with them. It's probably not the best format for that, because it goes through some things multiple times and is really intended to be, conceptually, it's more of an internal thing in the sense of, does it look like it has enough color contrast? You wouldn't want to report that to a vendor saying, well, we thought it looked like it might, we didn't test that. So those kind of things really wouldn't make as much sense to report at that level, but the document itself is, this template is going to be public.
Yeah. Stephen, and then Chris, if you still have one.
Just curious if you have aspirations to do this with the academic side. Because one thing I think would be helpful is if you actually had a tier that was actually for faculty.
Yeah.
This is what you can do without being technically proficient, and how do you?
In theory, that's already kind of built in. So the first couple of tiers, you don't have to be technically proficient to do tiers 1 and 2. So that's already kind of built in there. It's not specifically structured for, you know, a syllabus as opposed to a web page, but essentially it's already got something there to say NA if it doesn't apply. So, and that's actually right at like the top of the first page. If there's no video, just say NA next to this stuff. So I think it could be used for that. As far as whether it's used for that in terms of reporting and stuff, that's on these guys.
Yeah, so I would say that you can use the first two tiers. We could do something like this more geared towards the academic side. We are currently investing resources into upgrading our tutorials and hopefully doing some video tutorials because that's one of the big pieces of feedback we've gotten from faculty. But we could maybe incorporate through that process something similar. In fact, each of those tutorials is designed to have like a little checklist that you can say like, have I done these things for PDF? Have I done these things for PowerPoint? Which is just like a high level overview. You look like I didn't answer your question, Steven.
Nope, there's just wheels turning.
Oh, okay. Chris?
Along similar lines, kind of extending that a little bit, would it be possible to maybe post on the website or distribute somehow case examples of like maybe workflows or something like that to make this more, I guess, digestible to people that aren't like really involved in these processes? Because there's a lot of information. It can be pretty overwhelming pretty fast. I feel like maybe a couple of cases or even fictitious examples of how some units or departments or even faculty have maybe started and worked through some of this could be helpful and make it a little less scary or overwhelming.
Yeah, I think that that's a really terrific idea. Chris's question was whether or not we could put cases on our website to help show how to use this process, and I think that'd be a really good learning tool or teaching tool. Oh. Yeah.
Last quick question.
Alex had one, I think, right?
Can you skip tiers? Is there enough redundancy in the first tier?
In theory, you should go kind of in order, but you could really do whatever you want. I mean, it would make sense, depending on the resources you have, to give a student or someone else the lower tiers and then do the higher tiers yourself. But in theory, you want to be complete if possible.
Or vice versa, if you have an extremely technical
Oh, yes, if you
student.
have a very technical student, have them do the other stuff.
Yeah.
But it's not fully redundant across tiers. It's just really kind of builds. But there may be things where you could kind of say, yeah, I know I'm going to do this one later, but I'll kind of fill it back in as I go. But,
All right.
We'll be following up with more details by email in the next week or two. Thanks all for coming. Have a great weekend.